This offseason, Brad Treliving has done everything he possibly could to improve the Leafs roster. But that's not what this video is about. I'm saving my offseason review video of this man, Brad Treliving, for when the offseason is complete because there's still a lot of head. There's the Matthews contract, there's the Nylander contract, there's the Matt Murray situation, and obviously the Ilya Samsonov arbitration. And he also said he wanted to add some size and length to the blue line. So we have to wait to see how the offseason plays out because it's not over yet and I can't review it. But there is a situation I want to focus in on, and that's the William Nylander situation. And the way I see it is there's three options, obviously. There's walk, sign, and trade. And I want to critically break down all three of these options. Now, we're going to start with the least favorable option, and that's Willie walks. Okay? So Willie has a really good contract this season. He's making just under $7 million. He put up 87 points last season, 40 goals. The Leafs are, quote unquote, in a competitive window. So does it make sense to have William Nylander, the player, on the team? I think so, at this number, right? So you'd kind of use him as an own rental, which I hate that term personally, but he's going to get you goals and points. Like, there's no doubt about it. But there's a lot of things to consider when potentially letting Willie walk, right? And the Leafs have let a lot of players walk, and I'm going to give you a breakdown right now of some of the players they let walk. And, these are the players I'm going to focus in on. They have to have played for the team for multiple years. So players I didn't include is like Nick Foligno, Ryan O'Reilly, like those guys, they were rentals. That's different than having your own players and getting nothing for them. So yeah, and I'm not including bit pieces. Like I'm including somewhat significant pieces in the Leafs roster. Like, for instance, Noel Acciari walking if he played for the Leafs long term. I don't consider that a significant piece. Like bit pieces, forget about it. Like, we're not including that. Here's some of the players we let walk that we've had for multiple years. And the first portion is the one that I find the most painful. Bozak, Van Riemsdyk, Komarov, Gardner, though that four was at the beginning of the Leafs rebuild, right? So this is the window where they weren't supposed to be competitive. What ultimately hurt them is Matthews, Marner, and Nylander arriving on scene and pushing them to the playoffs because we decided to keep them as own rentals and lost them all for nothing, right? When potentially Van Riemsdyk at the time, you could have got multiple assets back. Bozak, maybe you could have got a second, but we lost all these players for nothing. And then you see Hyman there. We let him walk, own rental. Everybody, I think people were convinced maybe he was coming back, but at the same time, like, that was a very significant piece in the Leafs lineup. Got zero for him. Gardner, I don't know how much you would have got back for Jake Gardner. He was okay. Like people hate on the guy. He was a puck mover. Some teams, they would have liked to move the puck. So you potentially could have got something back. In my opinion, at the very least, something. Frederik Andersen signed a 5-year deal with the Leafs, played out all 5 years, got nothing back. Jack Campbell got traded, had a multi-year deal. I think he played for the Leafs 3 years. And there he went. Justin Hall, this was kind of I debated putting him in, but here's the reason why I put Justin Hall in. I have no idea how executives value Justin Hall, because to give him that deal, like especially Yzerman, right? Especially Yzerman. You'd think he's one of the most progressive GMs in the league, and he's very smart. But to give Justin Hall $3.4 million, it really makes me question what his trade value would have been, right? I know that's crazy. Some people might be looking from an outside perspective, like, oh, this guy's insane to include him. But really, like, how valuable was Justin Hall? That's like $3.4 million valuable. That's like maybe a third, maybe. but that's why he's on here. Michael Bunting, I think, came in for 2 years, played well on a cheap deal. We were going to lose him, but imagine, like, we could have got we could have probably got a lot for him, because if you see what some of these other contracts, like comparables, were going for, right? I'm trying to think of the Chicago player right now. It slips my mind, but 2 first-round picks there. Oh, I forgot his name. That's tough. Anyways, Kerfoot, nothing, and Mikheyev, nothing. We lost them all for nothing. You know what? I'm actually going to look up right now who this was, because it's going to bother me. It was Hagel. It was a cheap contract. They traded him, and they got like 2 first-round picks for him. It was a pretty crazy deal. So, like, players like Bunting can fetch some value as well, like a lot of value at that number and that many in that production level and what he brings. He could have got you something. So, like, people may think I'm crazy for including some of these players, but I don't know what their value was around the league. You could have at least got some value, but these are the players we let walk that I find we could have got something back. And that's a lot of nothing coming back. That's a lot of letting players walk, receiving no value back, right? You got absolutely nothing, right? You can't say absolutely nothing, because you got the years they played for the team, but at the same time, you didn't recoup assets. And when you don't recoup assets, right, you end up where the Leafs are. And where the Leafs are is in an asset poor position, and they can't really get involved on big pieces. We saw a lot of pieces traded, this offseason and the trade deadline that could have really benefited the Leafs. But instead, we don't have this big war chest. Like, we have Matthew Nyes and Fraser Midden. Nick Robertson undervalued. Like, he's not gonna get you a player of significance. And then you got Niemela and Hervinen. I don't know if they're the main piece in any big trade, right? So, and also we don't have first round picks. So, like, we could have had a fairly decent sized war chest if we made the right moves and brought in players, or brought in, assets, I should say, not players, assets like picks, prospects, potentially, that, could have developed, but also you could have used in future deals that would have benefited the Leafs, but instead, nothing. So, yeah. So let's go to the second option, and that's to sign William Nylander. And there's a lot to consider when signing William Nylander. First, you got to look at cap considerations and how the salary cap has progressed. This is since the beginning of the salary cap era. And what I really want to focus in on is the jump to next season. Apparently, it's going to be an NHL estimate is 4.79 according to Cap Friendly. And then the next is going to be a 5.14 jump. Apparently, it's going to go up to 92. Maybe the next season we see it potentially go up to 100 million, which is on the table, right? But there's a lot to consider with the cap. First, you have to consider there was only a 2 million jump over 5 years. So the comparables I'm going to show is based on that jump. And honestly, it's not too significant. So I think the contracts I've listed are very, very comparable to what William Nylander should receive now. And also things to consider, you have to be cautious. His age, William Nylander's age, he's going to be 28 when the contract kicks in. So if you give him like an 8-year deal, he's going to be 36, 37 by the end of it. So if you're giving him 10 million like he wants, which I find shouldn't happen, as we're going to see in the next couple of slides here. But, is he going to play at a 60-point pace when he reaches age 36? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, but also the cap may be really high, so maybe it'll be okay. I'm not sure. It's just something to consider. Regression/progression. So regression being, is he going to regress next season, for instance, from his 87-point pace, or is he going to improve on it, right? That's the way I see it. So if you don't sign him now and you decide, hey, we're going to wait to see how the season plays out, and let's say he finally hits like the 95, 100 point mark, what's that contract going to look like? What is he going to want? Is he going to even more want the $10 million range? But that's if you get him to the end of his deal and he still wants to re-sign with the Leafs and he's not testing free agency. Like if he takes a step forward, another step to that 100-point range, is he looking at a $10 million deal? We'll see. But if he takes a step back next season, which is entirely possible, to say, William Nylander 75, 80 points, it may be hurting his case to get that kind of deal that he desires, the $10 million range. And you're also looking at, you can't trust the Bettman, Jerry over there. The cap may not jump at all. Like, this is NHL estimate, but can you trust the guy for the cap to be jumping? No. The answer's straight up no. I do not trust this guy. He may only jump it another million or two. Like, people are saying, oh, the players made the NHL whole now, so, now now the cap's gonna start jumping. Well, that's not up to, like, that's everybody's projections, but projections could be wrong. It may not jump 4 million or that 4.79% or 7, that we saw earlier. It may not jump at all. We don't know. Like, we don't know. It's up to Bettman and the boys over there. So, And then there's also possibilities for another global event that might keep the cap flat. And that's something to actually consider when signing. You can't project forward. And that's what I don't like about that's what I really don't like about these contracts. Like Matthews wanting, he wants whatever he wants on a short-term deal, right? I don't even know what he wants. 13 mil on a 3-year deal, for instance. Like, in my opinion, what I think should really happen is, like, this is a different video for Matthews, but like, when it comes to William Matthews, I think they should both sign 8 years deals because they cannot project their futures, right? So Matthews is betting on himself, and I fully respect that. But if there's a catastrophic injury to him, he's screwed. He will not get that 15, 16 he desires, right? So I think, like, same with Willie. Willie is, by all accounts, he wants an 8-year deal. But if he decides to bet on himself and say, 2-year deal, and then something happens to him, or there's a global event that keeps the cap flat, they're not getting what they want anyways, right? So if there's some type of event, I think I think 8 years is best personally, but it's also something to consider when signing these guys, because if you give Willie 10.5, for instance, and then another pandemic happens, you're basically where you were when you signed all these guys in the first place. When you gave Tavares 11, when you gave Matthews 11 point whatever 3-4, when you gave Marner nearly 11, when you gave Willie 7, below 7, like, you're gonna have that same type of formula, and you're not gonna be able to spread the wealth around. So this isn't me hoping for a global event. It's me just saying, hey, that possibility is on the table. So it's something definitely to consider. And here's some comparables I drew out for Nylander's contract. 82 games, 40 goals, 87 points, okay? So we're going to start with Dubois, everybody's favorite comparison. 73 games, 63 points. A lot less than Nylander, but I value the center position a lot more, and Dubois just does just that. So I think this is ultimately, these numbers shouldn't get you what Dubois got, but I think because of the center bump, he got more money on a longer term deal. It's a deal I'm comfortable with for Nylander, of course. I'm comfortable anywhere in the 8s, but of course, that I don't see that as a realistic possibility. The Timo Meier deal, I know some people are strongly comparing this one to Nylander. 40 goals as Nylander had, less points, but he plays a different style. I personally would rather have Meier than Nylander, just based on, his size alone. Yeah, it's a good comparable. I think it's fair. But again, like I said, I think the point difference, Nylander's going to look at that and be like, hey, I do more than just score. I play make, like, And then there's the Jesper Bratt deal, pie in the sky. I don't think this is really too comparable, but, he's a winger. 7.875. I like it. Not going to happen. Not realistic. Same with DeBrincat. On a shorter term deal, this is something I've been looking at. Although I just went on a rant about not having shorter term deals for these players, I do think that a short term deal might be more favorable for both sides. I do, because DeBrincat is bidding on himself here. 7.875. He wanted somewhere in the eights, didn't get it on a long term deal. It's going to bring him to age 30 when the cap's going to be higher. So do I think if DeBrincat plays out, he's capable of scoring 40 goals if he continues on that pace for the next 4 years? Do I think he's capable of getting somewhere in the nines, potentially 8 nines? Yeah, so betting on yourself might not be a bad option, and it's why I have him as one of the comparables. Okay, so we got the Matthew Tkachuk contract from 2022. These are his 2022 numbers when he signed the deal. 9.5 million. He had 42 goals, 104 points. 9.5 million, I should say. I like the cap of 9.5. I obviously, don't get me wrong, think Nylander is anywhere close to this level, because he's not when he signed his deal. But for me, I think that's a good ceiling for Nylander on where to go. I think he scores below Matthew Tkachuk, even on the adjusted basis. Everybody says taxes. I think if you're accounting for taxes, I still think he should get below Matthew Tkachuk. I think that range, I think that's the ceiling for him. And then obviously I wanted to also throw in Huberdeau at 2022. Let me be clear. When he signed this contract, Huberdeau, he was an 115 point scorer. So that is something to take into consideration. And then there was the regression last year. Was it Daryl Sutter or was it actually Huberdeau? I think next year we're going to find out if he can get back to a high production level. I don't expect him to hit 115 again, to be honest. But this is the number he got when he signed the contract, 10.5. And yeah, I expect him to rebound and score more points, but I think this was a massive overpayment by Calgary. But we'll see how it all plays out with Huberdeau next season. But at the time, it was 115 points, 10.5 million. That's what he got. Obviously, this is what Nylander's gunning for, and I wanted to throw it in. I wanted to throw it in as a comparable. Is Nylander he's not this level. He didn't score 115. He should not get anywhere above 10, in my opinion. So I just wanted to use that as the scale. Obviously, we all know Huberdeau is not worth this at the moment, but it's the scale for the contract he signed at the time. And then you got Patrick Laine. I included him for 4 years, 8.7, 56 games, 56 points. He probably would have hit a point a game if he stayed healthy with Columbus in 2022. He had around that this season. He was just below a point a game. So, on a shorter term deal, 8.7, 4 years, I'd be happy with. It's a good comparable. I'm okay with the short term deal for Willie. It's fine. And then Mikko Rantanen, 6 years, 9.25. Again, I think this is a ceiling. This was 2019. The cap was around 81.5. So I think this is another ceiling. I think it's good to include the limits you're not willing to go over. And I think for both Tkachuk and Rantanen, I wouldn't go above these thresholds. And then this is what I would do personally. 8.8 to 9.5 over 8 years. Okay, I'm fine with this. I don't think 9.5. I think it has to be in between. I don't think 9.5. I think Willie should not get 9.5. I think 9.1 is kind of what I've been thinking all along on a long-term deal, to be honest. I think I'm comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable going above that unless it's like nickel and diming, but that's the limit. And then 6 years, 8.5 to 9.25. I'm using the Rantanen as the ceiling, but for this, 8.9 is what I'm most comfortable with. On a 4-year deal, anywhere between 8 to 9, I'm comfortable with. I'm thinking 8.5, to be honest. 3-year deal, 7.8 to 8.7. It's looking like 8.2 potentially. And on a 2-year deal, potentially, maybe we could play ball here, 8.1. I'm okay with that. We get him for 3 more years. Next season and the seasons after that. But again, for me, as like I would be thinking about my long-term future. Like in the NHL, anything can happen. And as I said before, I would probably be gunning for a longer-term deal just because you don't know the unpredictability. And this applies to Matthews too. And that's why I can't believe this angle that some people are bringing, like, oh, Matthews 3 to 5. It makes sense for him because, it brings him to a point where the cap will jump. Well, okay, what if in that 3 years Matthews messes up his knee? Then what? Or he royally messes up his wrist, his production goes down, and let's say he becomes a 70-point guy. Like, is he still looking at 16 million? No, absolutely not. So it applies to Nylander too. If he gets hurt in these 4-3-2 range, and that's his payout's gone. His big time payout is gone for good. And that's something they should consider. That's something the players can consider. Like they've been relatively healthy, and it's like bet on yourself, and I completely respect that. But you have to consider it's the NHL. You play on ice. It's a fast game. Anything can happen. We looked at Peter Forsberg and what happened to him. His ankle got messed up, and he was never the same. So, will the Leafs give you that lucrative big deal, or will any team do it if you're extremely hurt? Even Jack Eichel, he made the right call signing that 8-year, $80 million deal, because if you look at him, if you look at Jack Eichel, he messed up his neck, and that could have been the end of his career. He's beginning to progress up to what he should be, and he won a Stanley Cup. Phenomenal in the playoffs. But you never know. You never know when your last game is. So, there's a lot of consideration here for me. And then, obviously, the final option is Jerry walking up to the podium and announcing a trade. And, let's use some comparables here. Jonathan Huberdeau, we really want to go down this road. I guess it's the Matthew Tkachuk trade. Nylander's nowhere close to that, and I don't expect this return at all. I'm just throwing it out there right away. I want to cancel this. This is a Brad Treliving deal, so it's worth mentioning. Could the Leafs swing something where they get 2 really good expiring UFAs for William Nylander, and I guess Nylander would have to agree to sign a long-term deal there? Is that possible? People look at Calgary doing what Calgary did with Matthew Tkachuk, right? So trading for Nylander, signing him long-term, and the Leafs get 2 expiring guys. People love to say the Elias Lindholm, Noah Hannafin. That's a little rich to me. I think that's rich on Calgary's part, but people use that comparable, and seeing if Treliving can sign him long-term, they are his guys, right? So it's possible. That angle, I don't know, but that is an angle. It's worth mentioning, but I don't think Nylander's getting anywhere near this, especially, people look back at the trade and Calgary didn't get enough, but what else are they supposed to get? For Matthew Tkachuk, when you trade Matthew Tkachuk, you lose the deal. He's the best player in the deal. So getting Huberdeau and Weegar, at the time, really good players. Weegar's still really good. Huberdeau, I think, is going to get back to that 80-point level at least this season. And they got a future first, which you never know with Florida, how, Florida is a little bit of a choppy, unpredictable team for me. They can go on a hot run like they did last year, or, they could miss. So that it is lottery protected, but if it's kicked down the road, we never know. You never know what the future is going to predict, but the first, it's a good ad to have we'll see. Time will tell on this deal for sure. And then another comparable I used to here. DeBrincat for a first, a second, and a third. The first was top 10. I don't think that's gonna anywhere near happen for Nylander. I just want to include it as a reference point. DeBrincat right there. At the time he was traded off Chicago, he had a year left at 6.4. So, and then the next year, I believe DeBrincat's qualifying offer was really high. And I'm a little shocked he didn't just accept the qualifying offer. I'm not sure how it exactly works. I don't know if it was team filed arbitration or player filed arbitration, but I'm a little shocked that he just didn't accept the QO. I'm not sure. Like, I don't know the technicalities of the CBA, so I may be speaking out of turn. But I don't like. I included it as a reference point, as a comparable to what Nylander and DeBrincat are. Do I think Nylander's getting this return level? No. A top 10 pick is very valuable. They don't move anymore, by the way. Nobody moves up and down in the top 10. Why don't people make the trade? Like, it's crazy to me. I think I don't know. I don't know what's being offered to move up and down. I think maybe it's just the prices are too high. But I would love, like, if I had the 5th pick, it depends who the top 5 is, but I would maneuver. I would see what I could get in addition, right? But the thing is, you had a team like Nashville trying to trade into the top 10 when they're way out of the top 10. So I guess people value the top 10 in comparison to, picks 10 through 20, I guess. It depends how deep the draft is, but yeah, that's sidebar there. And then there was this season, which, is the scary one. Kubalik. Then you got another prospect, and then you get a first and a fourth. It's not the best. Kubalik is a middle 6 winger, or a middle of the lineup winger. I don't think, like, he's third, maybe second line. He can move up. It's a solid player to replace some goals from DeBrincat. And then the prospect, and then the first is conditional based on a few things. So, not a really great return. I know some people are going to want assets that can play now for Toronto, especially because you're giving up Nylander, you're taking 40 goals out of the lineup. But, if that's what the asking price is, then it's a little bit more complicated than what you think you're going to get in return, right? So, honestly, I think this is the closest level to what they might get, if I'm being honest, because you got to remember, when you trade Nylander, he needs a new contract. Trading Nylander alone is not going to fetch you what you want. So it's sign and trade, and then obviously the team has to look at the contract they're signing, and then you're going to have to determine value based on that, which, it could be poor. It's something people have to prepare for. It's something Leafs fans have to prepare for. The return from Nylander might be poor. And I know a lot of Leafs fans won't accept that, especially because their savior, Kyle Dubas, is gone. So, yeah. And then the Sharks deal for Timo Meier. They gave up a lot of bit pieces too. I think that was just contract, but we all know Meier was the big get. This was a year and a half of Meier. Janssen went back. There might be some salary. Zetterlund, couple prospects. The first, the second is conditional. You could have conditions based on performance as well. This is the kind of return I would want for Nylander. You get some players that could play, maybe some close to ready prospects. You recoup. There's a lot of recouping here that San Jose did of assets that you can use to go get another player that would play or fit well in the lineup, because we know the trade market is pretty at a stalemate. I think it's because the best teams don't like the teams that would want to acquire players don't really have the capital, and this would give the Leafs a lot of capital to play with. And I know people are going to be like, oh, we got to get something back that could play now. But, you know, getting trade assets and capital to go make another deal and getting that cap space to go make another deal is also key. You know, sometimes the best return isn't, oh, getting the best, getting the best possible players back. William Nylander is going to be the best player in the deal no matter what happens. But possible. And then another comparable, might be the final comparable here, is the Dubois deal. And I think this is probably the most realistic. You get a good young center, Valiardi, Alex Iafallo, another good player. Get a prospect, get a second. Really, really solid return. It's a nice return for Dubois. Obviously, Dubois is the best in the deal. Valiardi has potential at least. So, a lot to think about in terms of return, what you can get. Is it going to be on the higher end? No, I don't think so. Is it going to be on the very low end? It's possible. But is it also going to be somewhere where you could say, okay, it's a good return. The Leafs get a lot of depth pieces. They improve their lineup. They get a top 6 piece. Or maybe they add to the blue line. That's possible too. A lot of these deals have been for forwards, but you could get pieces to add to the blue line that will make you better there as well. And you never know as well. Another piece could be going back with Nylander to acquire, maybe in addition, to getting a blue liner they desperately need. They do a Nylander and say Liljegren for, a fairly significant defenseman and maybe some futures too. So that could also be in consideration, but I don't want everybody's expectations of a William Nylander trade to be sky high. In my opinion, they're likely to lose the deal. So that's also something to consider when you're Brad Treliving. And that's probably why he wants to get him re-signed. It's just, they're at a stalemate, but return is obviously, in my opinion, not going to be what people are going to be happy with, So, yeah, these are the 3 options for Nylander. And, if I had to choose, it's tough. It's a tricky situation. Obviously, for me, the walk is out the window. You can't let him walk, okay? That is not happening. We let too many players walk and got nothing back. So it's between sign and trade. I think what it comes down to is you need to have a limit where Nylander said, no, I'm not willing to go above this. And that's that. If he has that limit and he said it needs to start with a 10, I think trade has to happen no matter what you get back. It's just, you can't lose him for absolutely nothing. And you would have lost him for nothing anyways if he walks. So I think trade, some of the trades we saw, I can live with it knowing he wanted too much money. And, you're not just getting assets back when you trade him. You're getting cap space, future cap space. That's something to consider as well. When building a roster, you can better distribute the cash. So you're going to get players, cash. There's Patrick Kane still available. That could be, I know he's on a bum hip, but getting surgery to repair it, that may be something to bring into consideration. If you move him, you sign Patrick Kane, you wait till he gets healthy. That's a good replacement for now. Obviously, you're going to have to look at a long-term solution because Kane's getting up there in age. But, Tarasenko's still on the market. I don't know what's going on with his contract situation. There's still players that could score on the market to replace the production. Plus, the production's going to be replaced with what you get back. So, sign is my first option, in my opinion. But it can't be above, in my opinion, the threshold is 9-1, 9-2 I could live with. Above that, I think for Willie, it was nice. I enjoyed you being on the Leafs. People were frustrated with him at times. He wowed us at times. It was a good run, but you got to trade him if he wants 10. You can't keep him. You can't wait, like, you can't let him walk, and you can't sign him for that much money. So you have to trade him, and you have to accept what you get back, and you have to maneuver around with that. So, it's going to be an interesting time for Brad Treliving. I can't wait to see what he's going to do this offseason. Closer to training camp, I'm going to do, an offseason review and what I project him to do. But, we'll see what happens with Willie and Brad Treliving. I wish you the best of luck.